This is update for April 18, 2023, day 419 of the war and of the date update. This is also catch up for April 17. As always, I'm going to start with strategic news, and then we're going to switch to the situation on the front line in Ukraine. So first, as always, I'm going to start with China because we hear a lot of news about it. What I would like to mention is that probably less sort of, let's say, advertised on the main media is that the Chinese government enacted sanctions on Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. Those are one of the two main manufacturers of military equipment in the U.S., specifically, high tech like rockets and or missiles and so on, airplanes. And the sort of the problem with all of that is those companies, while they do assemble most and manufacture major components in the US, however, they do outsource a lot of sort of smaller and plain vanilla components to China. So this probably going to affect both manufacturers. Then US is preparing, probably everyone heard, preparing to announce some new sanctions that essentially ban transfer of technology to China. And there is high probability that that will trigger ban on export of rare earth metals to West and specifically to the US. So we'll see. We may sort of see or experience pretty big flare up in the coming week or so. Then US sent 200 military instructors to Taiwan. Then China is also not sort of sitting idle. They did large military exercise on one of their air bases where they were practicing sort of logistics. It's more like a logistics exercise. So they were practicing, supplying at night, military operations. So as you can imagine, when China is going to be attacking Taiwan, they need seamless logistics, specifically, supply of ammunition and supply of fuel. So they're already doing it. They're practicing very actively, and furthermore, they're practicing doing it at night. So they're trying to sort of do it in a stressful conditions to make sure that sort of they're going to be able to do it at, under any in any situation. Then related news: Indonesia is planning to evacuate 350,000 of its workers from Taiwan. I didn't even know that so many Indonesians are working in Taiwan. Then Russia and China, the Ministry of Defense, they agreed to deepen their military technical cooperation and also increase military trade. So we obviously, so far, formally, China did not provide any ammunition or any military supplies to Russian army directly. So we'll see if there will be something as a result of all of these sanctions from the West that China decided to openly support Russia. Switching a little bit to Russia, actually, Russia transferred Su-35 to Iran. I think 24 of those. It's actually turned out that they were intended for Egypt. Not clear what happened there, why the Egypt contract didn't work out and they went to Iran. However, there's probably a reason why Egypt switched sort of sides and did not provide ammunition to Russia, but they started selling ammunition to Ukraine. And by the way, in terms of where Ukraine gets ammunition from all over the world, so Ukraine gets ammunition, for example, from Pakistan, as I said, Egypt, from Bulgaria, Czech Republic. So basically everywhere, even from Iran, some of the seized ammunition that was going to Yemen, that was seized by the Western navies. It was sent to Ukraine. So and actually another interesting data point that Ukraine also getting ammunition from specifically shells, 155 millimeter artillery shells from South Korea, but the way it's arranged is very unusual arrangement. Let's put it this way. So U.S. is, I would say, borrowing those shells from South Korea, and then they transfer it to Ukraine. The reason is because South Korea is, I would say, feels under pressure and scared of Chinese retaliation, and so it's done sort of this kind of roundabout way. Then I also would like to provide update. I mentioned that Germany turned off its last three nuclear power plants. So you would think that they use natural gas. Turns out that they not. What they're actually switching to is to coal. So at this point, 33% or roughly third of German power generation is done through coal. So it's kind of ironic because coal is the sort of dirtiest fuels of all, and actually produces emits some radiation when you burn it. So again, um, the wisdom in Germany is I would say is clearly distorted. Let's put it this way. Now let's now let's actually switch by the way to I guess we can switch to Ukraine. So first, I would like to provide some more information. So Russia has been actively using gliding bombs, just like airplane bombs, and they modifying them by basically attaching, as you can see, sort of wings and then GPS navigation system that allow them to essentially correct this bombs as they fly, and it's very efficient. They have a lot of basically they take existing bombs and then they attach the skits to those bombs, and it's very cheap, very quick and easy, and then they use them and they are quite effective. And they inflict a lot of damage on Ukrainian military. So the number here, 500, means that usually that means the payload is 500 kilograms. So they're pretty heavy, and they actually better, cheaper, more precise than rockets. At least for using against Ukrainian front line and direct behind it. This is definitely much more efficient than rockets. So so far, Russia has been started using them pretty in large scale, and it's turning into big problem, big concern for Ukrainian military. Now, this is an example of what I was talking about, that that the conditions on the ground in Ukraine are, not suitable for wheeled equipment. As you can see, all of it is just completely stuck. This is actually tracked howitzer, and it's actually able to move. So as you can imagine, the best option is obviously tracked equipment, even though Ukraine is getting a lot of wheeled ones, and so hopefully everybody understands that this is not just sort of empty words, but this is really reality on the ground in Ukraine, and this is the same actually for Russia. So this is this sort of natural conditions in this part of the world, and this obviously happens sort of twice. Once in the spring, usually just typically March, February time frame, and then also could be October, November time frame. So those Those are sort of the most sensitive, the most typical months is when it happens. But this spring is extra wet in Ukraine. There's a lot of raining, so it kind of like extended the whole situation. And one of the reasons why this offensive is delayed is because of the terrible conditions on the battlefield, where everything, as you can see, is total mud, and you cannot successfully. Well, you can if you have proper equipment, but not with the equipment Ukraine has at the moment. Then another news, just general strategic, is Ukrainian president visited Ukrainian troops in Avdiivka, which is here near Donetsk, and then Russian president visited Russian troops. He didn't go to directly to front line. He was basically here on the Azov Sea shore, somewhere around Henichisk in this area, and then he also visited somewhere, North Lugansk. Apparently, he was in Lugansk or somewhere there. So essentially, both the reason for these visits is very clear. Both presidents are trying to boost morale and sort of show support for the troops when the offensive is expected. So obviously, Ukrainian president is sort of trying to inspire for offensive, and Russian president doing the same, inspiring for the sort of say staunch defenses on the Russian side. So all basically part of the psychological warfare on both sides. Now let's actually switch to the front line. I'm gonna walk through in a clockwise fashion, starting from the north. So the situation along the state border, somewhat a little bit quieter, not as active as it used to be, but still pretty intense. However, nothing sort of imminent in terms of potential sort of actual offensive on either side across the border. Then let's move to the North Luhansk front line. Things here are getting, as I said, essentially it's becoming quiet section of the front line, similar to Zaporizhya, even though Zaporizhya is becoming more active these days. I would say how Zaporizhya used to be, essentially. There's sort of never-ending skirmishes in this forest here, so that's just sort of going to happen, but there's nothing really truly major active going on there. Now let's move to North Donbass front line. Things here are essentially the same. Russian troops are extremely narrowly focused just on Bahmut. They're not even actively attacking on the northern flank and the southern flank. They're really trying to squeeze Ukrainian troops from the remaining parts of Bahmut. And essentially fighting is happening where I'm showing this area here and here. So essentially Russian troops are firmly across the railroad at this point, so just continually squeezing Ukrainian troops. So you can see the squeeze is extremely slow, it takes forever, and this is because Wagner mercenaries essentially extremely exhausted. They don't even have strength to attack here on the southern flank or northern flank, just pure primitive frontal squeeze. It's obviously probably creating a lot of losses on the Russian side. This is just a quickly walk through how things were developing over time here. So again, as I said, this is just a primitive, let's say, mid-grinder and squeeze of Ukrainian troops from the remaining parts of Bahmut. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. Things here also kind of like the same. Continuing Russian attacks out of this salient north of Avdiivka, then Pisky salient, also attacks here, and then Marinka. So essentially, really nothing changes. Then on the 17th, Ukrainian troops tried probing attacks on both sides of Vuhledar. Actually, let's just move to Zaporizhya front line because that's where I would say the focus of it. So, Ukrainians, so as I said, on the 17th, Ukrainian troops attacked here around Vuhledar. It was probing attack, not a major attack. And then on the 18th, Ukrainian troops attacked here a little bit east of Orikhiv. Again, this is also uh, probing probing attack. It's not major attacks. So so if we really look, and as I said before, looks like Zaporizhya front line is where this offensive is going to happen. There is not many sort of choices on the Ukrainian side, and for the Russian side, it's also uh, main area sort of application of their forces if they want to achieve anything major in Ukraine. So we'll see. It's totally possible that Russian side is waiting for Ukrainian side to hit, exhaust, and then go into counteroffensive and sort of push weakened Ukrainian troops and even potentially capture Zaporizhia. We'll see what happens. I'm not saying that this is the most likely scenario. It's very unclear what's going to happen because there's not enough information on what's sort of in the back pocket of Ukrainian command and what's in the back pocket of the Russian command. We'll find out when the battle will start, but I'm just explaining sort of objectives and risks for Ukrainian side. It's obviously Zaporizhia here is the biggest risk, and potentially, Russian side can try to also do this, not even pincer, just kind of like move up north and effectively force this withdrawal of Ukrainian troops here from the main front line. Very unlikely, but possible scenario. And for Ukrainian side, as I said, there's also very straightforward is move towards Azov Sea, run to Azov Sea, and basically splitting sort of Russian forces in at least two pieces. And as I said before, the most elegant would be actually move then along the Azov Sea and actually block this Crimea Peninsula and essentially trap all of these Russian troops here and force the surrender of those troops. That would be the most elegant, and that then would allow easy move later into Crimea. But more likely than not, the scenario is much more primitive. You simply get to the Azov Sea, essentially, and just split Russian troops, and then probably try to destroy Crimean Bridge and essentially create encirclement of all of these troops uh, in northern Azov and then in Crimea. Obviously, it's not a perfect encirclement, but essentially that will probably force withdrawal of all of these troops to Crimea. So effectively, Russian troops, due to the logistical issues, will not be able to successfully defend all of this territory, and they will sort of withdrew to Crimea, and was obviously the main goal then to protect Crimea. So this is a very sort of likely scenario where what's Ukrainian side is sort of trying to achieve in this offensive. Again, there is a big question if it's going to be successful. As I said before, Russian side is doing a lot of fortification. I'm sure they're bringing more troops. That's why Russian president was here, because they're expecting major move here on the Zaporizhia front line, and that's why probably he was inspecting troops and checking their preparedness to to withstand Ukrainian offensive. So as based on all of these activities, it's very clear that offensive is expected very soon, probably in a week or two or three, once the soil becomes a little bit in better condition, as you saw where everything stands soil wise. So it's really difficult for both sides because Russia has a lot of wheeled vehicles as well. The same sort of problem as Ukrainian, except they obviously rely a little bit more on tracked ones, and so they have a little bit sort of a little bit bigger advantage relative to Ukrainian side. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. And until next time, bye bye.